everybody, and welcome to another edition of Interactive Wrestling Radio right here on WrestlingEpicenter.com and YouTube. It is James, joined as always by Mr. Nick Knoll.
Hello.
And Mr. Patrick Kelly.
Howdy, y'all.
And we're here to do this week is talk a little bit about the goings-on in wrestling for the past couple of weeks, and also we were going to do a top 5 list, and I think that we're going to cancel the top 5 list for this week and instead interject some of our opinions on the state of wrestling booking these days and how we've somehow managed to fumble our way into board meetings on TV, which frankly bores the living crap out of me, and you can't expect anything from home to get there either.
Yeah, and this is a point that I've been talking about for a long time. Okay, I don't know why. WWE thinks this. TNA does it as well. They think for some reason that the process of matchmaking is compelling television, which is why we get so many segments on every show dedicated just to making matches for that same show, for the pay-per-view, whatever. You know, when I watch the NFL, I don't want to sit around and watch, the committee get together and put the team schedules together for the season, okay? I don't care. Just post it when it's done and we'll be good to go. I want to see the stories develop between the wrestlers. And, my God, and if this week's Raw was any indicator of this major problem, I do not care who runs the goddamn show, okay? Can we go back to the Jack Tunney days where we just had a guy whose authority was never questioned? I mean, the guy just looked like somebody that was in charge, and everybody bought it. And
he wasn't.
Just
he
let
had no
the wrestlers
power.
tell the story. So what?
And he wasn't. He had no power. He was some swanky office dude who worked up in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. And let the stories be about the wrestlers and what they're doing in their matches, and let the stories evolve from that. I really don't care about these struggles for power, these, like you said, James, board meetings. Triple H and Laurinaitis are battling for power over on Raw. A year ago, people were complaining that it was Dixie Carter and Hulk Hogan fighting for power in TNA. Nobody cares anymore. I'm sorry. I don't.
I'm going to actually say stop and say you can't lump TNA into this, because whereas WWE, it's a weekly segment of Laurinaitis undercutting Triple H. In TNA, it was a handful of segments. It was Hogan saying, I'm in charge now. It was Dixie saying, I'm filing suit. It was Hogan and Dixie saying that Hogan won the suit. It was never a weekly thing. You have situations with Sting, who is wrestling guys that are Hogan's representatives to try to get the power away from Hogan, but it's not a weekly board meeting. I mean, you don't see Sting, with the exception of 1 week where he faked everybody out by claiming he had been appointed by the network, taking control of the company. You don't see a situation with Sting, being like, oh, yeah, I know what you really want to do, but I booked this instead. It's a little bit different. I get your point.
It is a little different. It's a gray area, but I think the inevitable, Nick, is that it feels like the whole driving force of the main event, or it probably won't be the main event. It'll probably be like one of the sub-main events.
The Rudin angle will be the main event.
Yeah, if there's any justice, Rudin angle should be the main event. The main thing of that, though, is that Dixie's going to get her power back, and I can tell you that if they do that anywhere except the Impact Zone, where those people are just completely familiarized with the product to no end, to the point where it's actually boring and sickening to watch, if they do it anywhere else, the crowd's going to crap on it, because it could be like, okay, so some, MILF is now running the company again. Big freaking deal. I don't think that's going to go over well, that segment. I really don't think that is going to go over when it finally occurs. The announcers will try to sell it as a big deal, but I just think that it's going to flop.
Well, overall, I just don't care about, who's running the show. A lot of stories. The Attitude Era started it. It was fine then because it was revolutionary, and they managed to do something and create interesting characters with it. But the wells run dry on that, and I'm just sick of all these stories dealing with whoever's in charge of the show. I think it's just an old hat that's boring, and I don't care anymore.
I do agree with you to that extent. I'm just saying, though, that the way we're saying it, it sounds like if you're not watching TNA, you're assuming that there's a weekly segment where Dixie reappears. We haven't seen Dixie on we've heard her name a handful of times, but we haven't seen her on TNA TV. How many years now has she owned the company? Maybe 10 times in terms of any type of storyline appearance? So, and I do agree with you to a certain extent, James. I'm hopeful that when, they do it, whenever Dixie takes control of the company again on screen, that they do it in a way where maybe, she comes out, but, it's guys like AJ and AJ, Kaz, and Rude that are picking up Bischoff and stuff and throwing his office apart and kicking him out of the building. I do agree with you that, that ultimately, and that's one of the things I like about TNA, that Dixie does have such a small part in terms of what her role on the show ever is. She's never been a storyline focus, primarily outside of this Battle for Power, and more or less that it's Hogan and Sting that are doing the story. And that's just kind of my point, where on the other side in WWE, you have the situations where Triple H is like, something's going on here. I think you're behind it, Laurinaitis. And then you have Laurinaitis going, no, Triple H, I'm not against you at all, Triple H.
Yeah, and you know what, Triple H, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt when he first took this role. I was like, you know what, if they just have Triple H oversee the show and let him be that guy, like, I wouldn't have a problem with Hogan being an authority figure on the show if he was just there and they're just using his image on the show. Say what?
Well, like we started off this debate, if he were the Jack Tunney type that would come in only when necessary.
Right, exactly. And I thought, Triple H does that, that'll be fine. But he's basically the lead guy on Raw right now. Like, as far as storylines and characters go, he's taking over Punk's spot. I don't even know, who's the champion? Is it Del Rio?
Del Rio.
Yeah, it's Del Rio, which we always say take it with a grain of salt, but apparently in the WWE now, they're ready to give CM Punk a serious title feud. Like, apparently, the plan all along was for the belt to wind up on Del Rio and a big Del Rio-Cena feud. Now they're thinking they want to actually have CM Punk do a story over the course of many months for the belt. And I'm thinking, okay, now that's your plan? That wasn't your plan when the whole goddamn world was saying, oh, my God, that was amazing over the summer?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't even think CM Punk, had they done his departure after Money in the Bank right, if I were booking it, he wouldn't even be a regular back on TV yet. Like, at most, he'd be appearing in the crowd and causing a ruckus every now and then. Basically, you know what? Miz and R-Truth are doing what Punk probably should have been doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think it was back way too soon, and I feel like they said, okay, we'll put the belt on Punk to get people talking, but our golden children, Cena and Del Rio, are who we really want. And to me, and I posted this on our Facebook page, I said, that's like saying in 97, 98, yeah, Austin's kind of over, but our plan was always for Mark Merrill to be the biggest star. And I don't mean that as a knock on Mark Merrill, but look, I mean, there was no denying that Austin was more over at that point. It would have been, and and people think I don't dislike Alberto Del Rio. I think he has potential. I just feel like he's not in a position where he should be in this role yet. He should not be a two-time world champion. And I feel like that they're bum rushing this guy because they decided months ago he was going to be champion. And if you live and die by a game plan, you're going to get eaten alive. My Nebraska Cornhuskers proved that when they decided to just run the ball 900 times in the second half, even though it didn't goddamn work.
Did they lose that game?
Yeah, that's putting it nicely. They were murdered. They were embarrassed. They were like Eli Manning in December.
Oh.
Ouch. Well, you know what? He's the number 3 ranked quarterback right now, so I'll just ride the happy train for as long as I can.
Yeah,
of course he's the number 3 ranked. It's the beginning of the season. He's great at the beginning of the season. It's the end of the season you guys always seem to choke.
Well, That isn't always just Eli. Our defense always, where I get mad is our defense always falls apart in December, and, people can just pass on us, left and right.
What I think is the problem, though. Getting back to our original point, we, as wrestling fans, did not grow up in an era, neither in the NWA or WWE or WCW or ECW to a lesser extent, because they kind of started doing that earlier on than the other guys, where there was a known authority figure that was accessible, questionable, and constantly manipulated.
Right.
And that's what we have on the screen now. Whether it's involving the actual boss or not, the storylines on both companies, and I will say both major companies with WWE and TNA, circulate very heavily on who's running the show and who's making the matches and what matches they're making. And in the old days, you just tuned in and accepted that the right matches were being made by the right people, and you didn't have to spend half the show worrying about who that person is. And
I agree with you on that point. And I get the rank as a TNA defender, and I'll be the first to admit I'm pro TNA and I'm anti WWE, at least modern WWE. But I absolutely agree with that point. TNA has done it plenty of times too. The Mick Foley Jeff Jarrett feud.
Even the current feud with Hogan, and I don't mind the feud. In fact, I'm going to be ordering Bound for Glory, barring any ridiculousness. I'm probably going to end up just paying to see it because I honestly am interested in seeing what happens in the Philadelphia crowd.
They're showing it in movie theaters. They're going to do a closed circuit thing, which is kind of neat. Nowhere near my area, but
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
The UFC did that a few months ago. In fact, they think they do that quite often now. Most people I talk to that see UFC fights that don't order them themselves go to Hooters or a local kind of bar and grill kind of.
I'm not sure. Don't hold me to this, but I think WWE was experimenting with the idea of doing closed circuit broadcasts again last year. I don't know how far that got off the table, but I'm pretty sure I remember something if nothing else, it was a question on one of their numerous surveys that they do.
What I'm curious about is how it turns out for them. Because money-making wise, it could be brilliant. Because not only are you paying to see the show, you might not pay the full amount that you would pay to order it on pay-per-view. But if they're smart,
you get a live crowd experience.
Live crowd experience, so that's the draw to bring people there. Plus, you also have the opportunity, money-wise, to put together merchandise booths and things. Even though your event is happening in this case, Philadelphia, you could have in Los Angeles people buying the merchandise for that show, which is pretty cool. Merchandising-wise and thinking-wise, that's a great idea. Whether there is the demand for this show or WWE show or any show outside of UFC, which is just wildly popular, to support it, I don't know. We'll have to just wait and see on that.
Well, I should look up the listing, but and these are the magic words, ladies and gentlemen. If I were in charge, my plan would be to try to put it in our strongest house show markets, the markets that when we tour, we do pretty well in.
That's why they're nowhere near Washington, D.C., because I don't think they've ever toured out in Maryland and D.C.
Yeah, so a good example would be put something in Orlando, Florida.
Exactly.
Because let's face it, Orlando, Florida,
put something there. Yeah, they do good numbers even when they go back to Nashville, even Alabama area where they did the recent house show, the recent Impact tapings.
Yeah, and I am excited because the next 2 weeks are in Knoxville, Tennessee. The Impact was on the road, so they taped.
Which isn't Impact a lot better when it's not in the Impact Zone?
Yes.
I think in terms of the atmosphere, yes. It helps, but it's sometimes if it's a really good show, it's going to be a really good show, and if it's a really bad show, it's going to be a really bad show. No matter, the atmosphere. Though the atmosphere is certainly a positive for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, and I hate to keep going back to it, but it's kind of like ECW. You always knew it was going to be a good show when it was at the ECW arena or when it was in Queens, New York. But everywhere else that they did shows from, you was always kind of a mixed bag because even though they're always worth a rowdy crowd that I'm convinced just traveled in buses to follow it.
Like Ring of Honor.
I think so, yeah. But even though there was always those that, mainstays that were going to be at every show, you only got the whole crowd of crazies when they were at those two venues, and that's the ones that you had to see. And
right.
Yeah, well, and that's what in the Impact Zone. I think that unfortunately they don't have that same thing. They have kind of a very bored-sounding crowd that just, and it's a taking it for granted kind of thing, where they don't like. It's like, oh, here comes Sting. Now, in any other arena around the entire country and/or world, it's going to be like, holy shit, yay! But because they've seen it 5 times that week, they're kind of, yay, it's Sting, yay. It's like no fire.
I'll say this. I am glad to see that they're doing multiple shows on the road, and I'm hoping that trend continues as we go in, as we get past 2011 and go into 2012. And even if it's just 2 shows a month, that's a huge improvement. I mean, it beats 0 shows a month on the road.
Well, yeah, exactly. 0 recorded shows a month anyway. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest right away. I hate when they record internationally. WWE especially, it's just too weird, and that's just something that that's always bothered me is that you always get that like weird, bizarro world reaction to things, especially in Canada. But that actually results in humor. But Toronto sucks; they should never go back there. But
you know what? It's been so bad since 2004, have they? Like that
was
one
the worst.
SummerSlam they ruined. Yeah,
they ruined SummerSlam. They completely ruined SummerSlam. Yeah.
Why? Because they didn't want to see JBL versus The Undertaker? Oh, my God, those are the worst people ever.
No, it was the whole card. It was like they were just
anyway.
acting. They were acting like idiots the whole night.
It was like the whole night. Yeah, exactly. They just didn't want to be there. And it's like, well, you paid a lot of money to make this show suck? Really? Cause
yeah, I remember Taz was getting like legit pissed off doing commentary.
That's funny.
Like at one point I think it was he was even like, now they fucking boo Edge, the hometown guy. Really was losing it during the commentary at one point.
He definitely was. Yeah, I mean,
which
you know what? Can I ask this question? And that brings me to my next question. Actually, finish what you were going to say, Nick. I'm sorry.
I just want to say this real quick and kind of be funny. Is it just me, or does when Taz and Austin Aries were doing commentary this past week, did they just look like a fat and thin version of the same person? They were wearing the same sunglasses, the same suit. I was like, if I'm Aries, I'm thinking that's what I'm going to look like if I ever stop working out. Which I know Taz really isn't that. Well, maybe now he is.
He's kind of puffy. He's like Road Warrior Animal. He's not necessarily fat. He's just kind of puffy.
Yeah, he's on bold font.
Anyway, my question was going to be, who the hell decided that it was a good idea to keep Booker T on all shows now?
Wait, James, you're telling me you don't enjoy this guy mumbling incoherently for 4 hours every week?
I'll tell you this much. I would enjoy much more seeing Matt Stryker out there. On at least one
we say that all the time. I'll say this, though, and this is going to sound sad. I think compared to Jerry Lawler, I'd rather have Booker T. I'm not even close to kidding.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it's weird because I remember couple times, example, when he got hurt during the Best of 7 series with He Who Shall Never Be Named Again, Booker said it on commentary, and I thought, yeah, that guy, I thought, Booker said it on commentary, and I thought he did pretty well. And then they did this one night where, like, years ago in TNA, where the Main Event Mafia took over, like, the whole show, and they kicked, like, Tenay and Don Less at the time out of the booth. And most of the night it was Booker and Kevin Nash under the names of Black Ice and Chet Lemon doing commentary. And I thought, damn, that's really funny, the way they were doing it. I thought, Booker actually should look into doing commentary when his in-ring career is over. And I don't know what the fuck happened. I don't know what happened.
The joke is that behind the scenes,
Hello?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah, sorry about that. I kind of hung up on everyone. Behind the scenes, Booker T and Stevie Ray used to always do commentary, to entertain the boys during the WCW shows, and that's how it came to be. And Booker continued doing that when he went to WWE. And, they think it's funny, but I don't think, and I like Stevie Ray, don't get me wrong, but I don't think I'd put him on the list of my top 50 favorite announcers. And
you didn't love when he would say stuff like "Suckers got to know."
Suckers got to know, and Mama says it bees that way sometimes.
Right.
But she got.
Or, what is it he said once? He was doing like a sit-down interview with Lex Luger, and he said something like, and Luger said something like, "This is just between you and me, right?" And Steve said, "You, me, and I think and the 500 people that are still watching."
That's actually a good line.
Yeah, which it was one of those situations where he was trying to make the point that this was a lie, that this was being broadcast, but I think it was kind of like a low blow considering the state of affairs in World Championship Wrestling at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was there was a lot of discontent going on there, but a lot of them were pissed off at the at a lot of different things. I mean, I know that sounded like a stupid comment, but it really isn't. They were all angry because they were getting the rug pulled out from under them. Okay, we want you to compete with WWE. We don't get why you're not getting the ratings. By the way, you now have to tape both shows on the same night. And we're taking away your pyro and lighting budget. So you want us to compete, but we have to tape two shows in the same night using the same talent, and we have no budget for production. All right, well, that's going to work out well.
And we have no idea who the fuck's running this company. You've got Eric Bischoff, who's bouncing in and out, Vince Russo, who's as burned out as anyone could possibly be at that point.
I mean, there you go. And there's another example of authority figures, because that was what was going on there at that point, too. Vince Russo was in charge, and then he's not there because he throws a hissy fit and the office fires him. Then Ed Ferraro's around, but he's not really playing the boss, but he's trying to be it backstage. And again, another example of what we were saying at the beginning of the show. Authority figures run amok, and nobody really cares. They just want to know who's wrestling who.
And at the time, I hate to say this, James, though, the issue wasn't the authority figure on screen. The problem was there was legit issues of who was running the company backstage. And
well, that's the problem that they're running now, is that the line was very much blurred at that point as well between on air and behind the scenes, too. You have to take that into consideration.
Right.
And because on air was becoming behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was what it was. They were bringing everything to the forefront. The Good Old Boys Network that they addressed in person and all that, because Kevin Sullivan and them taking back control in the early part of 2000, where no matter how bad anybody thought the late part of 99 was for WCW, and it really wasn't bad. I don't quite get the comments that everybody seems to have the uniform opinion of right now. But
that's being the sheep. It's kind of like everyone that knows anything about baseball blames Bill Buckner for losing the '86 World Series, even though he just blew one play.
Game 7?
Yeah, that's my point. So unfortunately, certain things become fact because people say them and scream them the loudest. And unfortunately, then we take that to be fact. Like, WCW was absolutely horrible in 1999. Yeah, there was no chance of saving it. It was over. They should have closed it in 1999.
It was bad at the beginning of 99. The summer was okay, and Russo's first run was really quite entertaining.
Right. It had good points. It had bad points. And I'll even say this. As hard as people are on the end of WCW, there were still a few salvageable things coming out of there. Was the whole show perfect? No, there were a lot of issues. I mean, the Magnificent Seven, and guys are just disappearing randomly. Hogan's gone, Sting's gone. The title changes hands every 2 weeks.
They did a thing where Bret Hart hit Goldberg in the desert with a shovel, and then Bret Hart was never seen again.
Really? That was his last appearance?
Yep. He was in a shovel. It was like Bret Hart's in a pickup truck in the middle of the desert. He hits Goldberg with a shovel, and then he's gone. It reminded me of that. Remember that weird-ass segment with The Undertaker and Jake Roberts and Ultimate Warrior, where Warrior is crawling around like in this haze, getting bitten by snakes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And then Warrior disappeared like 2 weeks later, so he did. Well, that was after the SummerSlam debacle, so.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, to be fair, though, if you got bit by that many snakes, you might need a little time off.
But I don't even think that at SummerSlam they even addressed that happened.
Yes, they did. Hogan and Warrior cut a backstage promo, and they said something about him being bit by a cobra, but he's still here or something. So they did reference it.
Oh, they did. Okay, I just remember that night felt as weird as it apparently was backstage. So.
Yeah. Well,
I was also around the time where Billy Jack Haynes was trying to kill Vince McMahon. So.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story, by the way.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome in a way, and it's very sad in a way that Billy Jack was that desperate that when that he needed a job that badly, and it's too bad that Vince is such. I don't care if Tony Atlas comes back on the phone line and yells at me. Vince was a fucking asshole for doing that. If it goes down the way it's been said that it went down, they just brought him in to laugh at him. And it's sad that when that happened, Billy Jack was so angry that he had to apparently grab like a big old 12-gauge shotgun and want to blow Vince away.
Well, Vince, and this is the truth, Vince McMahon is a very petty person. The Self-Destruction of the Ultimate Warrior DVD, the whole, what was that whole controversy where the episode of Raw got moved and he hated the Denver Nuggets? So the whole episode of Raw had to be dedicated to hating on the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah.
Vince is a very petty guy, and he doesn't like to be. The Billionaire Ted segments, which were not funny.
They were not funny, and for those, everybody seems to forget this, and they don't show it ever because they don't want anybody to remember it. But the Billionaire Ted stuff concluded in the preview show to WrestleMania 12. They did a ridiculous match where both Hogan and Macho die in their match, this ridiculous match, and it's supposed to be funny. And they cut to a live crowd shot inside the arena and wherever they were at WrestleMania 12. I think it was Los Angeles. The crowd booing.
Yeah. Well,
what did the crowd do?
They were booing.
Well, wouldn't you? I just thank God that wasn't on the live pay-per-view.
Because it was on the preview, and they never show it again. But the crowd booed. They didn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was funny. I get that you were mad at Hogan and Savage for leaving, but that was just petty and stupid.
Well, apparently he was mad at Savage for fucking his daughter, but...
You think that'll break now that Savage is gone? That's really what happened?
Here's the thing. Sometimes I always have a feeling that in a situation like that where I don't want to accuse, I'm not going to say that it was that's what went down, but clearly something more than the standard he left to go work for another company happened. Something more went down. And I truly believe there were only two men that knew the full story. One was Randy Savage, and he's gone. The other is Vince McMahon, and he's not talking. And there's always going to be speculation. You're always going to have the odd person that's going to speculate, but we'll never know for sure.
If it was Stephanie, I think she would probably remember it.
Well, you know what? To kind of reinforce that theory, I got the Best of WWF Managers DVD or WWE Managers, whatever. And when they get to the Elizabeth section, they show Stephanie McMahon, and she's like, "Oh, I loved Elizabeth so much, and I looked up to her. She was like a role model." And that kind of put the idea in my head. It's like, well, that's why she slept with Savage, so she could kind of like be Liz for a while,
Wow. You know,
guys,
if I die, the day I die, like God says to me, Nick, you can ask one question, I'll answer it honestly. I'm tempted to actually ask, did Stephanie McMahon sleep with the Macho Man?
And how would you feel if he looks back and says, what? No. Vince just doesn't like him because he left to go to WCW. I'd be like, damn it. I say, no, you know what I honestly say? I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go to hell now. Oh, man. Well, I'm going to get ready to go, guys. Do you guys want to finish her up? And
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking
Sure.
forward to By the way, before we go, we're going to get back on track here, guys. We got an interview lined up for the next week here, and we're going to get back on track doing more regular shows, and we're going to have set formats here starting soon. So keep on listening.
Because
it's like synchronizing our menzies.
We're synchronizing our menzies. Yep, because we are BFFs.
Oh, God.
And we have just, with that joke, I have just alienated our entire male audience.
I was just going to say this. I actually yelled at James before we started taping this.
Because Nick did not want to do my top 5 list that I put together earlier today, and he's like, I don't want to do it. I haven't had time to think about it. I need more time. I think it sucks. And it's like, okay, well, fair enough.
Well, this is the guy that went toe-to-toe with Jim Cornette, so...
Yeah, I'm not going to have any problem yelling at you.
And we're not even married. Have a good night, guys. I'll see you a little bit later.
All right, later, man.
Well, as I posted once on my Facebook, I'm an easily fired-up guy. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse.
Well, I still say that you arguing with Jim Cornette is the ballsiest thing that anybody's ever done on the show, so congratulations for that.
Which, by the way, I blame James for that. Because what happens is he's doing the interview, and he says to Cornette, he says, and I think we're all in agreement, the three of us here, that easily Ring of Honor has the best weekly TV show. And I'm like, shit, now I got to say something, or I'm just going to feel like the world's biggest hypocrite considering how much criticism I've heaped at Ring of Honor over the last couple of years. So I felt the need to speak up.
Ring of Honor, go ahead, Nick.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say, didn't they do their first TV taping or something? When is that going to start up?
It already did. Funny little story. They had the debut episode, and a couple of the markets, by mistake, played the second episode. Oops. Yeah. Which, I'm just going to say this. If you can't organize the system of 1, 2, 3, 4, you might want to rethink things a little bit.
How do because that happened to a few other TV shows like that. God, it happened to Firefly, which I've never watched, but I heard they aired episodes out of order, and it just confused people. And the Clerks TV show, which I thought was really funny, but never really got off the ground, I believe they aired the second episode first, and then the fourth one, and then the show got canceled. Because,
sometimes, I wonder sometimes, I think with certain situations, sometimes it's the network that does that, where the network
if it was only certain markets, it has to be who's ever running the network.
Yeah, which I got it, or it could just be someone put the wrong tape in, or hit the wrong button, or something. I'm not actually heaping on Ring of Honor here, because I think that's one of those crazy things that it isn't really your fault. It's like, you tape the show.
I'm back here, guys.
Okay.
Real quick thing. WCW did something very similar, but it happened within the same show. And those who might remember this, it was the April 12th, 2000, which was the second show of the Bischoff-Russo era. On Thunder, they had the first segment air, and then the third segment air. But something very important happened on the second segment. So when they came back and they aired the wrong segment in the wrong order, they were telling you what you just missed, which was a massive swerve, which was Jarrett being one of the guys that came out of nowhere and hit somebody. they completely aired it in the wrong order, and it really effed up the entire show. And the funny thing was, even though that happened, the show still ended up getting a 3.0 rating, which WCW at that point in time was like, whoa, really? Just they
Cuckoo.
You know what I think happened was probably the people that were watching called all their friends and said, hey, can you turn on WCW Thunder for me and try to explain what the fuck I just missed?
There you go.
All right, well, just kind of making a little, yeah.
All right, well, is there anything you wanted to talk about before we head on out of here, Nick? Because I got my rant on authority figures out there, so. It's really, the authority figure thing is really a small part of a bigger problem. I think the entire format of the show needs to change. Because right now, because when the Attitude Era came around, the whole show was changed, and it was just rebranded, remarketed for a whole new generation. And now that format has gotten stale, and we haven't gotten out of that format at all.
Well, I absolutely agree with you, and I dislike the general wrestling format of start with a talking segment, match, every week. I'm a believer of, and I was actually kind of glad I missed it because I'm sparring in my kickboxing sessions now, so I'm going on Mondays too. I missed the start of Raw, but from what I understand, they started with a match.
Yeah, Randy Orton match, yeah.
Yeah,
Randy Orton squashing Drew McIntyre, but yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? It's kind of like this. It's a baby step. It's like, holy hell, they started with an actual match. A referee was out there and he rang the bell and they wrestled and somebody got a 1, 2, 3 and the bell rang again and it's like, it's a baby step. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. And do you guys think that obviously we can't go back entirely to the old school because that would just be, a step backwards too. But if you guys remember the old primetime shows at all,
the panels.
Yeah, you had people you had Gorilla and Bobby Heenan in a studio, and they'd cut to matches that happened either in house shows throughout the week or what have you, and aired them then, and that's how they told the story of the occurrences. And WCW did that too with the main event for years. I mean, everybody seems to remember the main event as just being Mean Gene and Bobby Heenan, which partially was in '95. But before then, it was Magnum TA and Jim Ross and all that doing a very similar style of show where they cut to things that happened, throughout the week and aired it that way to tell the stories. And, I don't know if they can make that the main show, but I wonder if that format would be a way to at least
like a Sports Center type of thing.
Kind of. I mean, they showed the whole match, or at least the vast majority of the match. But, yeah.
I think it would work. I don't think it could be the main show.
Right.
For a couple of different reasons, but supposedly there's going to be a WWE network. I'd be fine if Sunday nights they did almost like what NFL has, NFL and Red Zone or whatever you call it, the Sunday night on the NFL Network. It's a big wrap up of all the games of the week, and then they get you ready for the week to come. I'd love to see them do something like that. For WWE, especially in a situation where, I'll use this as a good example, you have situations where they don't always get all the story that they need to get across. Take the Sin Cara versus Sin Cara feud. There is a legit story. Anybody who says that crowd was quiet because they were confused is a fucking idiot. Nobody just flat out cared. Oh, here's why. Here's the thing. The company didn't give them a chance to care. There is a legit story there where the original Sin Cara, mostly known as Mystico in Mexico, before he had the name Mystico, the black Sin Cara was working under the name Mystico, and he lost a court battle for that name with CMLL. And some people have always said, hey, look, this, his FCW name was Hunico. On the Independence, he was named Incognito. A lot of his supporters have said, hey, look, he's better than Mystico. The problem is he got shortchanged and didn't get the name. So, I mean, there's a legit story about that, but they never acknowledged it until today when Joey Styles got around to writing a feature about it. And I'm like, that would have been a really nice thing to do, like through translators, and have a segment on SmackDown to explain what the fuck the storyline was.
I'll tell you what.
So can we say that the WWE is 3 for 3 on screwing up doppelganger angles? I mean, Taker versus Taker, Kane versus Kane, Sin Cara versus Sin Cara. They screwed them all up.
But you know what, if you really want...
If Leslie Nielsen would have been involved in the Sin Cara versus Sin Cara angle, I think it would have been all right.
Well, he's dead, so...
Yeah, well, then it would have been even better.
I mean, there's a right way and a wrong...
Dracula, dead and loving it.
Well, the problem is that what they would do is they had a Sin Cara show up, and then the other Sin Cara would show up, and they're never... What they should have done, if there was going to be a doppelganger, they should have had, like, the doppelganger doing stuff and have, like, the original one being, like, confused. Like, maybe, you have Daniel Bryan walking backstage, ooh, the evil Sin Cara lays him out, and then everyone's like, whoa. And then, like, the real Sin Cara, you could play it up and say he's trying to explain to people, and, Michael Cole,
I can't speak English.
You could actually make that point of, like Sin Cara is, like, trying to explain. He's, like, saying in Spanish, like, love me, mock me. And, like, they're trying to explain, and they're on the commentary, like, is he trying to say that it wasn't him? Or is he for what? Have the fact that he doesn't speak English be like the handicap. Because the argument could be Daniel Bryan doesn't speak Spanish.
Speaking of this, I want to bring up this point. The Battle Royal that they did last week, on the last episode of Raw for the Intercontinental title or whatever, how can Sin Cara be eliminated from the Battle Royal if his clear-cut double was the one that got thrown out? I mean, did the ref just not see that, or what?
Patrick, let's just say this. If we spent time breaking down and worrying about the mistakes that wrestling referees make, we drive ourselves crazy.
Well, it wasn't like a mistake that the referee made. It was something that they wrote. That was sort of like written, oh, he's eliminated because his evil double jumped into the ring instead of him and got thrown out. I was like, well, okay, I'm not sure how that works, but all right.
Yeah. Well, I will say this.
The Russo ending right there.
Yeah. Which, by the way, everyone's trying to put over how great the ending of Hell in a Cell was. That was straight out of WCW in 2000 when Russo was burned out, because you had this angle where, like, oh my God, all the wrestlers are storming down to kill R-Truth and Miz, and then the 6 security guards hold like 20 wrestlers back, and then only Triple H can break through them.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, I can't, like, they're trying to make, Miz and R-Truth into these Hellraisers, but it's like, they're kind of, you kind of have to do it in a way that's realistic, and, what they honestly should have done is, like, have them break through the cage somehow, like wire cutters, and they slip out through the back.
You know what? It's a shame that those wrestlers, it's a shame that Kane wasn't there, because he could have ripped that door off.
Exactly. Fortunately, Mark Henry can't do that, as a segment he did with Batista once proved.
Yeah, that was... Did they air that as it was on television, or what happened there?
I think they did air it as it was. Like, I think there might have been some small edits, but for the most part, he just was pulling on the door forever, and you got to have Batista in there trying, like, to, act like nervous, because, I think they were trying to do the story of Mark Henry's the one guy that kind of scares Batista because he's so big, and Batista's not used to fighting a guy as big as him. But, it kind of was, like, to the point of, okay, if I'm Batista, I'm, like, climbing out of the cage, or I'm getting ready to attack him as soon as that door swings open, because he's spending so much time trying to open the goddamn door.
That happened once with Brock Lesnar, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so too. Where they want it to look cool, but I guess maybe they don't prepare the door as properly. Maybe they're afraid of, like, if one guy takes the wrong bump, he knocks it off, then that blows the segment.
Right. Well,
remember,
Kane, for all the times we knock him, that dude, he got it in one try.
Right. Well, also say this. Chris Sabin and the X Division title during Ultimate X2.
That was actually pretty cool. That looked pretty cool.
Well, the problem was that Ultimate X1, the belt fell off a couple of times. So I think they said, they used electric tape to secure it, and they thought, well, I mean, it's going to hold the belt better, but when you get a big guy, a guy that's like over 100 pounds hanging on electrical tape, it will snap. Well, evidently, electrical tape's a little bit stronger than we thought it was.
Well, it depends on how many rolls of it they used. I mean, that thing must have been reinforced pretty good, but...
Or Shawn Michaels at SummerSlam '95 when he's trying to pull down the belt, and he's pulling it, and he just lets his hands give out, and he drops, and Scott Hall saying, I could hear Shawn swearing in the ring, and Shawn's throwing the ladder around because he's so pissed off, which kind of describes Shawn Michaels' whole career at certain points, and then he's like, finally he takes a second, he calms down, he goes back up there, and Vince is just like, he got it, because I think Vince was taking a deep breath because it's like, oh, thank God that thing came down this time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of been the knock on that ladder match, which is an otherwise really good ladder match, if anybody,
check it out. It is.
I don't think it's as good as the Mania 10 match, but it's a worthy sequel.
Right. It's a good match, and the one big issue with it is really not the wrestler's fault. I guess maybe Shawn should have thought to unhook the belts.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that happens,
Yeah, I think again, he probably just thought, okay, these are just like snaps. I pull hard enough, they're going to give way. Mm-hmm. Nope. Which,
all right, well, go ahead.
It would have been funny, though, if it hadn't happened, if it hadn't come down the second time, if Shawn just would have, really gotten pissed off and tried to walk out. Because
he'd done that before. Maybe not before then, but he had done stuff like that in the early portions of his career. I know on the Heartbreak and Triumph DVD, somebody, in one of the events that they did leading up to WrestleMania 14, somebody in the crowd threw a battery at him. Yeah, and he walked out.
Yeah, which, also I'll say this. At that point, Shawn was done. His back was killing him. He was probably, I think he says that was the single most depressed he ever was. So, that was just the straw. That was the battery that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But
and you know what? That's a really bad analogy to use because I should have said straw, and Shawn's back really was broken.
Yeah, it was. That's right. You'd never guess it if you watched him 4 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think it was Eric who said once, and that is proof, when I'll steal the line, and that is proof God does love Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, he was able to come back from that and pretty much still be as good as he ever was.
Right, definitely. Yeah, but that said, I'm glad he retired a couple of years ago, and he's now been retired for a while because you don't want to see him start slowing down again.
No, and, for all the guys that I rag on for holding on too long, Flair, I'll throw Sting in there, even though Sting's not as bad as a lot of the other ones. Bret Hart is probably the worst defender. What?
Well, I'll say this, he's getting there. He's not.
Bret Hart is the worst defender, I think, no question.
Which is really sad because Bret did walk away, because Bret was retired for so many years, and then he said, I'm going to come back, and it's like, okay, please don't come back again. I'm back again. Stop. I'm not going to stop.
I'm a hitman, brother. But yeah, for all those guys that hang on too long, Shawn walked away, and, when he was retired, he was just as good as he ever was. Again, It's not as good as he ever was, but at least close enough to it to where we could think that he walked away respectfully.
Right. And here's the thing. For the most part, he appears to be the one guy that retired as a pro wrestler, at least this time around, where he's generally happy to be retired.
Yeah.
You kind of get the sense that when he does appear on the show, they really had to kind of beg and plead, or, I think the one example he had was he was plugging his Adventure series.
Yeah, didn't he have a hunting show or something?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's called McMillan River Adventures or something.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess the McMillan River is something in Texas.
Yeah, that's likely.
Yeah, so that's pretty much her show. Authority figures suck. Ring of Honor needs to make sure they clearly label all future episodes as 1, 2, 3, or 4. And Shawn Michaels is happy in retirement.
Awesome. And next week is Bound for Glory. I'm sure you'll want to talk about that. And I have a lot to say about that show, too, both good and bad. There is some good stuff on this show, too. It mixed in with my usual negativity. But, yeah, thank you to James Walsh for giving us the call and getting us to go. And what were you going to say, Nick?
I'll say this. Bound for Glory, there's some things I'm really excited about, some things I'm willing to give a chance to, and one thing that I am on my knees praying works.
Yeah, I think I know what that is. But,
I'll do this.
There's one match that I'm really excited for. Huh?
Guess which one I'm praying for?
Hogan and Sting. They need it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in front of a Philly crowd. James is hopeful, and, that's the Hogan fan speaking. I do not expect a good match there. I really don't.
I don't know. They've made it no DQ, which I think has the potential to help it because that limits, that opens it up more. It can be more brawling. They can use, chair spots. They can send, Gunner in to try to take Sting out. They can do a little bit more, and not have it all be on Hogan and Sting's elderly backs.
They're going to overbook the holy hell out of this, and for the better.
But I will say this: they are doing something that I think will work pretty well to get Hogan a lot of heat.
What's that?
You have to watch Impact tomorrow to see the full story. I shall not.
Oh, I read the spoilers. Yeah. I actually kind of like what they did, but we'll get there when we get there. But that's it for our show tonight, everybody. Thanks again to James Walsh for being here with us and organizing the show, and thank you, Nick, for staying on the line with me the whole time, and thank you, everybody, for listening. And we will be here, I guess, next week. So see you then.